Marshall Peak. Chapter 5830. Operation Jade, Marshall Peak, amid the vast void. The massive armies of both the humans and the Black Ink clan were engaged in a bloody fight. Warships flew about as secret techniques and divine abilities were shot in all directions. Between the unleashing of evil-purging divine spears and the spread of the black ink clouds across the void, countless lives were constantly lost in the chaos of the battlefield. One warship could no longer hold up against the Black Ink clan's fervent attacks. The defensive array shattered, and breaths before the warship was annihilated. Numerous silhouettes shot out into the enemy lines with the determination to go out fighting. Wherever the Black Ink clan gathered, the human race masters made sure to target the area with the strength of their artifacts, and they managed to carve large swaths into the enemy lines. Ever since the Red Flame Army started sieging E5 territory, brutal battles had broken out countless times. The fighting was most intense on the main battlefield, but outside the main battlefield, many other areas had been turned into smaller battlefields too. This was a feverish battle between the masters from both sides. The Eighth Order masters, the Divine Spirits, the Territory Lords, and the Pseudo-Royal Lords were clashing across the many smaller battlefields as well. Now and then, dragon roars and phoenix cries echoed across the void, the strong, sonorous roars reaching the ears of both allies and enemies alike, shaking the hearts of all. The death toll soared on every single battlefield. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order Master assuming command, so to face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords, the Eighth Order Masters had to use battle formations. Most of the time, a single Pseudo-Royal Lord was able to keep 5 or 6 Eighth Order Masters occupied. Even the Divine Spirits formed groups of 2s and 3s to deal with the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Fortunately, the humans had benefited greatly from the Universe Furnace. Many new Eighth Order Masters had emerged over the years already, and the ordinary grade open heaven pills that the humans brought out from the Universe Furnace led to the birth of even more Eighth Order Masters. Had that not been the case, the number of Eighth Order Masters in the Red Flame Army would not have sufficed for them to keep the enemy at bay. Many factors went into deciding the victory of a battle as significant as this. Although the fight had been going on for quite some time now, both parties were still at a stalemate. On some of the battlefields, the humans had the advantage, but on others, the Black Ink clan were in a better position. Achieving victory would depend on which side was able to make the most of their advantage and widen the gap to eventually make it snowball into a decisive win. But, for the time being, both the human race and the Black Ink clan lacked the means to enable them to achieve such an effect. For the past decade, the Red Flame Army had fought similarly intense battles with the enemy numerous times, but they were never able to gain a decisive edge, though they were never on the losing end of the fight either. All in all, the situation remained a stalemate between both sides. However, as time passed and the number of battles increased, the situation began to look bad for the humans. This was because the Pseudo-Royal Lords that the Red Flame Army were up against were far too decisive and ruthless. The Black Ink clan's large numbers of Pseudo-Royal Lords imposed a heavy burden on the Red Flame Army. None of the Eighth Order Masters or the Divine Spirits could face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords alone after all. Yet, the Black Ink clan had sent nearly 20 Pseudo-Royal Lords to E5 territory, which ended up occupying a sizable portion of the Red Flame Army's top combat power. To hold their ground, the Eighth Order Masters fought valiantly with no regard for their lives as they confronted the Pseudo-Royal Lords. They figured that even if they could not kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords, they were still going to do their best to injure them. As long as the injuries kept mounting, they would have a chance to kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Therefore, though the Pseudo-Royal Lords were injured time and time again, many of the Eighth Order Masters had been sacrificed as well. In the last 10 years, nearly 200 Eighth Order Masters had died at the hands of these Pseudo-Royal Lords, but right up till their deaths, these Eighth Order Masters had given their all to inflict wounds that would make it hard for their enemies to recover. 200 Eighth Order Masters was not a number that could be overlooked. Back on the Black Ink battlefield, no Great Pass would even have 100 Eighth Order Masters in total. The humans were only able to withstand such heavy losses because their heritage had strengthened and more Eighth Order Masters kept rising. While the humans used this method to fight against the Pseudo-Royal Lords, the Black Ink clan's strategy to counter them was just as simple. They sent the pseudo-royal lords who were too injured to fight back to No-Return Pass to recuperate and deployed unscathed ones to join the battle. This meant that the pseudo-royal lords the Red Flame Army was dealing with had changed throughout the last 10 years, though the total number on the field remained the same. There was still a large group of pseudo-royal lords hanging around at the No-Return Pass. That being said, Imo Nayi did not send all of them out. Firstly, it was because there had to be masters standing guard at No-Return Pass, and secondly, it was feeding into the strategy he had in mind. This was the best way to consistently deplete the human race's strength. In this way, Imo Nayi actually shared me Jing Luan's stance. The current battle between the human race and the Black Ink clan was not for the sake of claiming great territories for themselves, but to weaken the enemy's forces. The fact that both parties had the same idea led to the devastating battle at E5 territory. Aboard a purifying Black Ink battleship in the Red Flame Eastern Army's possession, the Eastern Army commander's Qiu Yanghua was going through the reports he received from the battlefield and giving out orders as needed. His expression was grave, and the atmosphere inside the warship was tense as well. The humans' 12 armies had all fought against the Black Ink clan on the Great Territory battlefields for thousands of years, so without enough Ninth Order masters available, armies were still under the command of experienced Eighth Order masters like Qiu Yanghua. All 12 armies had massive numbers, so it was hard for an Eighth Order master to take control over the entire situation alone. Thus, the armies mimicked the system of the great passes of the past, splitting into Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies which formed a single Grand Army when combined. Naturally, each army had a master leading them. Doing so made things a little more complicated as the 4 army commanders would have disagreements along the way, but there was no other choice. Without a Ninth Order master to take the lead, the humans had to rely on the veteran Eighth Order master's battle experience and perceptiveness to make appropriate arrangements. Thankfully, they had spent several millennia getting into the right mindset, and the 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army had formed an impossibly close relationship. They were able to work as one to command the entire army smoothly. Their rapport and mutual understanding after so many years of working together enabled the Red Flame Army to display their maximum strength at all times and fend off the Black Ink clan's attacks time and time again. The Black Ink clan failed to gain any upper hand in their fights so far. Out on the battlefield, things could change at any moment. Amid the intense fighting, everyone was focused on their immediate vicinity, and it was difficult for them to pay attention to the situation happening elsewhere. Thus, it was easy to get into the situation of having great success on one battlefield while losing miserably on another. Masters could break through the enemy lines and slaughter their troops, or suddenly be under siege and in need of rescue with little to no warning. The Red Flame Army's masters were only able to maintain an equilibrium across all the fights because the commanders kept moving them around as necessary. Inside the purifying Black Ink battleship, Qiu Yanghua had only just given out an order when the observer who was keeping an eye on the situation out on the battlefields called out in alarm. "Sir, a group of Black Ink clan members have broken through the lines and are charging straight at us. They're coming over now with 2 pseudo-royal lords in the lead." He checked the monitoring array and was able to quickly confirm their identities. His voice trembled as he exclaimed, "It's Jiang Qi and Hu Yu." Qiu Yanghua's eyes flashed as he scoffed. Here I was wondering why they'd gone into hiding. So, this is what they were up to. After clashing all these years, the Red Flame Army knew full well who the pseudo-royal lords they were facing were. Although the pseudo-royal lords were rotated in and out a lot more than the territory lords, there were a few pseudo-royal lords that the Red Flame Army considered their biggest threats. Jiang Qi and Hu Yu were 2 such pseudo-royal lords. Though they were not necessarily stronger than other pseudo-royal lords, they were more cunning and harder to anticipate. The Eastern Army had fought against these 2 pseudo-royal lords many times. The Eighth Order masters had formed battle formations to try and injure the 2 of them, but they never succeeded, and a few Eighth Order masters had been sacrificed along the way. Ever since the start of the current battle, the Eastern Army had paid close attention to the pseudo-royal lords' movements, but they never found any trace of these 2. Thus, Qiu Yanghua, who was in command here, was not surprised that they showed up now. The fact that they were charging over so openly made it clear what the 2 pseudo-royal lords' goal was. They wanted to defeat the enemy by slaughtering the leader first. As long as they killed Zhuo Yanghua, the Eastern Army would be left without a commander. Even though someone else could take over the task of giving out orders to the Eastern Army, that would take time to organize and would leave an opening to strike at. Thus, the Black Ink Clan would have the chance to overwhelm the Eastern Army. The Black Ink Clan's determination was seen from the fact that they were sending 2 pseudo-royal lords to accomplish this goal. Furthermore, they also brought a large group of territory lords with them. As the Black Ink Clan assault team surged forward, the Eighth Order Masters moved to intercept them, but the 2 pseudo-royal lords did not even bother to look at the humans. Instead, the territory lords broke off to keep these Eighth Order Masters occupied. Black Ink's strength kept spreading out wherever they went, and with the strength of the many Black Ink Clan members, they were able to clear a bloody path through the human army and charge towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. "We can't hold them back, sir." The master who was reporting on the situation cried out in alarm. With the way things were going, their enemies would soon be able to fly right up to them, and when that happened, everyone inside the purifying Black Ink battleship would meet a disastrous fate. Zhuo Yanghua eyed the 2 figures in the distance with a cold gaze. Despite not being their equal in terms of combat strength, he showed no sign of wavering as he commanded, "Execute Operation Jade." His voice was steely and left no room for objections. Everyone was shocked and some wanted to advise against it, but they could not bring themselves to do so. They had been under Zhuo Yanghua's leadership for many years now as they fought against the Black Ink Clan all this time. They had killed countless enemies and received immeasurable glory. They had a deep reverence for Zhuo Yanghua and knew what kind of person the Eastern Army commander was. Thus, once he gave the command, all of the masters inside the purifying Black Ink battleship jumped into action. Human silhouettes whizzed about as the other warships began breaking off from the massive purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off into the distance. Meanwhile, Zhuo Yanghua and a few other Eighth Order Masters stayed behind. Not only did they not leave, but they even began flaring their auras. It was obvious what they were doing. "I'm right here." When the 2 pseudo-royal lords who were charging over saw the warships leaving the purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off with many human race masters on board, they thought that's what Zhuo Yanghua had fled. However, when they sensed his aura, they no longer had that worry. In fact, they chuckled to themselves. Is he trying to let his subordinates escape because he knows he's doomed to die? They did not mind. Their goal was to kill Zhuo Yanghua. Once they killed the army commander here, they were confident that the Black Ink Clan would be able to slaughter the entire Red Flame Eastern Army before swallowing up the rest of the 3 armies. By doing so, they could deal a catastrophic blow to the humans. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5831. Explosion, Marshall Peak. Zhuo Yanghua came from Profound Sword Paradise and entered the Black Ink battlefield when he was a 6th Order Master. After spending over 10,000 years serving at Profound Sword Pass, he went from being a 6th Order Master to an 8th Order Master, and also exhibited a talent in strategy and command that surpassed his peers. When the Profound Sword Pass was still in existence, he served as Eastern Army Commander. Later on, the human crusade to the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction ended in defeat, and the army was forced to retreat. Profound Sword Pass had stayed back to delay the enemy, but the Black Ink giant spirit god attacked them viciously. In the end, Profound Sword Paradise's 9th Order old ancestor died in that battle. Zhuo Yanghua had been fortunate enough to escape with his life. With the help of others, he was able to stay alive and retreat to No Return Pass. Later on, the No Return Pass had been lost as well, and war broke out in the Barren Territory as the Black Ink Clan invaded the 3,000 worlds. Thus, Zhuo Yanghua could be considered an extremely experienced 8th Order Master. Not many 8th Order Masters had a longer service record than him. No one could object to him being in charge of the Red Flame Army's Eastern Army, and by default the army commander of the entire Red Flame Army. Throughout all these years, he did not let the human race down. Under his leadership, the Red Flame Army had slaughtered countless enemies and gained a massive amount of military merits. However, now that 2 pseudo-royal lords had their eyes on him, he knew he would not be getting lucky this time. The many millennia of fighting had made him intimately familiar with matters of life and death. Thus, Now that his predestined time was upon him, he was neither fearful nor frantic. His heart was at peace, though he did have some regrets. After all, he had spent nearly all of his life engaged in the war against the Black Ink Clan, but he would not have the chance to witness the human race's ultimate victory. It was not to say that he did not see this day coming. As an army commander, he had already planned for a situation such as this beforehand. He knew that sooner or later, the Black Ink Clan would rely on the strength of their pseudo-royal lords to execute the strategy they were currently using, so he prepared for it in advance. Operation Jade was the counter he created for such a situation. If a powerful enemy came to strike him down and he had no chance of victory, he was going to take them down with him. The pseudo-royal lords were picking up speed and closing the distance as a powerful aura locked onto Zhuqiu Yanghua. As he stood unmoving, he declared, "Brothers, sister, it has been my honor to fight shoulder to shoulder with you today. After today, we will join hands and conquer the afterlife next." One of the Eighth Order Masters chuckled. "That's the way it should be. It's a shame we won't be around to witness the end of this war," another one remarked. Another voice rang out, saying, "The time to kill has come." The Eighth Order Masters who remained behind had known from the start that they were most likely headed for their doom, but none of them felt any fear. On the contrary, when faced with such enormous pressure, their thirst for battle intensified. Zhuqiu Yanghua's typically calm face broke out into a wide grin as he exclaimed, "In that case, charge." As he spoke, the Eighth Order Masters channeled their world force into the arrays, and in the very next breath, the massive purifying black ink battleship which had been quietly floating shook before shooting forward in a flash. The two pseudo-royal lords who were charging over had been completely calm at first, but they were startled when they saw what was happening. Though they knew full well just how stubborn and full of resolve the humans were, they were taken aback by such an aggressive response despite the obvious power differential. Hu Yu, the larger of the two with a pair of wings growing out behind him, coldly snorted, overconfidence. He had seen similar situations many times. When confronted with a significant disparity in power, the humans would usually react more aggressively, though that choice tended to be driven by unrealistic fantasies. If he was still merely an innate territory lord, he would have to dodge situations like these. However, ever since he became a pseudo-royal lord, there were few human race masters that required him to proceed with caution. Jiang Qi, who was charging along beside him, warned, "Don't let your guard down." Despite saying so, they did not slow their pace. They had brought some territory lords along with them, but they had all stopped to block the Eighth Order Masters who came to intercept them. So right now, it was just the two pseudo-royal lords who were fearlessly rushing straight towards the purifying black ink battleship with nothing but their mighty power to back them up. From a distance, the large artifacts that had been installed into the purifying black ink battleship began unleashing their power under the control of the remaining Eighth Order Masters. However, these artifacts were only standard issue, so even though they were strengthened by spirit arrays and powered by Eighth Order Masters, it was hard for these attacks to wound the two pseudo-royal lords. The two pseudo-royal lords dodged or deflected the formidable attacks as they drew nearer to the purifying black ink battleship. Once the gap had shrunk to a critical point, Jiang Qi and Hu Yu both unleashed their powers at the same time. A wave of intense black ink strength coursed through the void towards the purifying black ink battleship. A dazzling light barrier lit up and shielded the purifying black ink battleship as Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others used the defensive array to block the attacks. The never-ending stream of black ink strength kept colliding against the defensive array, making it ripple violently. The defensive array was under constant strain, and its light quickly faded. Before the pseudo-royal lords entered close quarters, the powerful shield had already been breached. This was not because the purifying black ink battleship's defensive array was weak by any means. However, there were not enough masters on board the purifying black ink battleship right now. Only a pair of Eighth Order Masters were maintaining the array, so it was hard for it to display its full strength. If there had been sufficient masters to keep the purifying black ink battleship's defensive array up, then even though it would not be able to withstand the relentless attacks from two pseudo-royal lords for long, it would not have broken this quickly either. Without the protection of the defensive array, The purifying black ink battleship was akin to a human who had been stripped naked of all defenses and stood unprotected in front of two menacing pseudo-royal lords. As the overwhelming attacks rained down on the purifying black ink battleship, its bow shattered and many artifacts were destroyed. The remaining Eighth Order Masters had no choice but to assume battle formations to defend themselves, but with only a handful of Eighth Order Masters, it wasn't enough to fend off two pseudo-royal lords. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were caught in a hopeless situation. Jiang Qi and Hu Yu grinned as they lunged towards the humans. Just then, Zuoqiu Yanghua's gaze hardened. He was squeezing an array jade in his hand as he channeled a huge amount of energy into it. In the next instant, the tattered purifying black ink battleship broke apart, and the Eighth Order Masters could barely keep their formation as a shockwave burst forth. The taunting looks on the two approaching pseudo-royal lords' faces had disappeared, only to be replaced by alarm and terror. Jiang Qi's eyes grew large, while Hu Yu's expression rapidly shifted. As the purifying black ink battleship exploded, a pure, dazzling white light burst into existence. It was as if a great sun had exploded and its light scattered across the enormous void. Purifying light. Jiang Qi snarled, not hesitating for even a moment as both he and Hu Yu swiftly retreated. This was the exact moments Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were waiting for, so they were not about to let the pseudo-royal lords back away so easily. They were still in their battle formation and began casting secret techniques towards Jiang Qi. These secret techniques were not particularly damaging, but they had one thing in common, which was the ability to restrain one's opponent. The Eighth Order Masters did not think they would truly be able to pin down a powerful pseudo-royal lord. Their goal was only to delay him as long as possible. Their efforts paid off. Due to the effects of the secret techniques, Jiang Qi's figure grew sluggish and the burst of purifying light was able to engulf him. At the very next moment, Jiang Qi's furious, anguished cries escaped from the depths of the dazzling white light. Hu Yu was more fortunate as Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others did not target him, but even so, he still suffered during the explosion of purifying light too. Although he had only been surrounded by the light for a brief moment, he was still in agony as he felt as if his body was on fire. Once he stumbled out of the area that was covered in purifying light, he turned back with a look of lingering fear. The Black Ink clan naturally knew about the large amounts of purifying light that were sealed inside the purifying Black Ink battleships. Over the years, many humans had fallen into the hands of the Black Ink clan and were turned into Black Ink disciples. Thus, the Black Ink clan had a fairly good understanding of their enemy. The humans also had artifacts known as evil purging divine spears that contained purifying light and were used to defeat powerful Black Ink clansmen. However, the humans had never used the purifying light inside a purifying Black Ink battleship to directly attack the Black Ink clan before. Therefore, the latter had no idea that the humans could utilize such a strategy. It cost a great deal to create a purifying Black Ink battleship, and out on the battlefields, they were generally command ships where the leaders of the human race armies gathered to strategize. Throughout all the battles, as long as the humans were not completely routed, the purifying Black Ink battleships were never destroyed. But today, Hu Yu witnessed something new. When the huge amount of purifying light exploded out of the purifying Black Ink battleship, even a pseudo-royal lord like him had great difficulty in confronting it head-on. How is Jiang Qi? He can't be dead, right? Amid such thoughts, the dazzling light gradually faded away, and Jiang Qi's silhouette reappeared. When Hu Yu spotted him, his heart dropped. Jiang Qi was in a terrible state right now as Zuoqiu Yanghua and the other Eighth Order Masters were attacking him with such ferocity that black blood was constantly splashing. Hu Yu could sense that Jiang Qi's aura was greatly weakened. He's severely injured. With wounds as grave as this, Jiang Qi would have to return to a Black Ink nest to recuperate for at least 100 years. Hu Yu could not help but feel relieved for his good fortune. Thank goodness they didn't target me. He knew that if they did, he would not have fared any better than Jiang Qi at this moment. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were going all out. Two pseudo-royal lords had come to attack them, and one of them was now severely injured by purifying light. It was the perfect opportunity for the humans to double down on the offensive. If they could not kill off this injured pseudo-royal lord quickly enough, they would be out of their depth once the other returned to render aid. With this in mind, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others did not hold back at all. Paying no mind to defense, they went all out to unleash their most devastating secret techniques and divine abilities, even though it meant that they would be injured in the process too. Jiang Qi was battered by the relentless attacks and suddenly found himself in an extremely dangerous situation. Fortunately for him, Hu soon came to his rescue and shouldered the brunt of the attacks. The two pseudo-royal lords came over to kill Zuoqiu Yanghua, and even though they had carelessly suffered in the process, Hu was not about to abandon Jiang Qi and flee on his own. The purifying black ink battleship had exploded, so the humans no longer had any means of defending themselves against them. With Hu joining the fight, the pressure that Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others faced increased manifold, and all of the Eighth Order Masters knew that their battle had been lost. They did not manage to kill Jiang Qi in time, so they no longer stood a fighting chance. However, this only made them even more determined to fight to the bitter end. Initially, even with their combined strength, they would have only been able to hold their own against a single pseudo-royal lord. Right now, Jiang Qi was not in peak condition, and while Hu was relatively unscathed, the fight was still intense between both parties. That being said, both sides knew what the outcome would be. The humans were destined to die. This was just their final desperate show of resistance, with them being too injured to even use those mutually destructive secret techniques again. Martial Peak. Martial Peak. Chapter 5832. Joining the fight. Martial Peak. The battle was intense, and with each passing moment, more lives were lost on both sides. The other Eighth Order Masters saw the predicament that Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others had fallen into, and they were beside themselves with worry, but they were all occupied with their own opponents and could not lend a hand. After just moments of clashing, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others' frenzied strength was beginning to weaken. For the sake of killing Jiang Qi, the Eighth Order Masters had unleashed their most powerful secret techniques, but these methods were similar to Yang Kai's soul-rending thorn in that they not only harmed their enemy, but also themselves. Alas, they failed to kill Jiang Qi in time and were now injured themselves, so it was challenging for them to continue putting up a fight. Even so, the Eighth Order Masters were determined to fight to the end. Jiang Qi and Hu seemed to have noticed this as well and were no longer in a rush. They remained defensive the whole time to prolong the fight as they were waiting for Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others to expend all their strength before dealing the final, crushing blow. This was the safest way for them to proceed with this battle. After many years of clashing against the humans, they had garnered numerous experiences and learned the hard way to never underestimate their enemy, especially when they were desperate. Many a time, the humans who were on the verge of defeat were able to unleash startlingly powerful attacks at the very last breath, just before perishing. If the pseudo-royal lords were not careful, there was a high chance that they could end up with an unexpected failure instead of a complete victory. Such incidents had happened numerous times in the past. Thus, even Jiang Qi, who was heavily injured, was able to remain patient and quell his ferocious murderous intent. He did not allow his rage to overpower his reason. Amidst the devastation across the battlefield, an undetectable silhouette was rushing unnoticed towards Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others. Yang Kai, now a Ninth Order Master, was using Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to stealthily infiltrate the battlefield. It was highly unlikely that a true royal lord would be able to sense his approach, let alone these pseudo-royal lords. This innate divine ability was incredibly useful. For instance, inside the Universe Furnace, Yang Kai had used it to snatch the supreme-grade Open Heaven Pill away from the Chaos Spirit King. However, despite its usefulness, there was still a disadvantage. When Yang Kai was using it, he could not use space principles, for as soon as he did, he could no longer conceal himself. That being said, it was not a bad trade-off, as he was immensely powerful now and could move at great speed even without instantaneous movement. When the purifying black ink battleship exploded, it caused a huge commotion with purifying light lighting up half the battlefield. Yang Kai's attention had naturally been drawn to it right away, so he immediately noticed the situation. Knowing that Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were in a perilous position, he did not waste a single breath as he rushed to their aid. Yang Kai avoided all the fights between the two armies, and in just over a dozen breaths of time, he arrived at the part of the battlefield where Xiao Yanghua and the others were clashing with the pseudo-royal lords. At the moment, the Eighth Order Master's strength had greatly diminished. Hu Yu knew that now was his chance to strike. So he charged at the humans and threw a punch with his full force, delivering a shock to the humans as their strength declined at once. To make matters worse, as the humans' injuries were piling up and their auras had grown unstable, even the battle formation was beginning to show signs of cracking. The Eighth Order Master's heart sank. There were two reasons why they could put up a fight against the two pseudo-royal lords until now. The first was that Jiang Qi and Hu Yu were being cautious in their attacks, but secondly, and more importantly, they were relying on their battle formation. They had formed a six-paths formation which allowed them to combine their strengths as one. However, if the battle formation broke, they would no longer be able to pose a threat to the pseudo-royal lords. Jiang Qi was already seething with rage because the humans had managed to severely injure him earlier. So when he saw the situation now, he knew he could not let this chance slip away from him. He stopped acting passively and instead followed up Hu Yu's attack with a powerful secret technique of his own that hurled straight towards the humans. Someone of his strength and power would certainly have enough discernment to strike at the most opportune moment. As black ink strength loomed over them, Xiao Yanghua and the others were now in an even more precarious situation. The battle formation that they tried so hard to maintain was on the verge of crumbling apart. They can't hold out any longer. Hu Yu noticed what was happening and growled, "Kill?" As soon as he finished speaking, he began charging towards Xiao Yanghua and the others murderously. However, at that very moment, he had a strange feeling. His senses tingled with the warning of danger, and alarms seemed to ring in his head. He then seemed to hear the churning of a river rushing towards him. What's that? Hu Yu was confused, but soon really saw a rampaging river appear out of nowhere and crash down on him. He instinctively tried to move away, but all at once, space solidified around him and he could not escape. Once the river washed over him, Hu Yu disappeared. Jiang Qi jumped in fright at the abrupt turn of events. He looked over to see what was happening, but all he saw was a massive river cutting through the void. As the currents surged along the great river, he could vaguely see Hu Yu's figure struggling within. But once one of the waves came crashing down, the figure disappeared. All at once, Jiang Qi's scalp grew numb and his hair raised on end as he spotted the figure standing in front of the great river. One look and he knew who this was. Yang Kai. It was the Killing Star, the one whose name was known far and wide among both the human race and the Black Ink Clan. The one who made the Black Ink Clan suffer countless terrible losses over the last few thousand years. Jiang Qi had never met Yang Kai in person before. He was one of the many innate territory lords who managed to sneak out of the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, and upon his arrival at the No-Return Pass, he hibernated in a black ink nest to recuperate from his injuries. That went on until a few centuries ago when the war broke out in full between the human race and the Black Ink Clan. Under MOU's command, many of the innate territory lords used the source fusion technique to create a large group of pseudo-royal lords to deal with the Ninth Order Masters. Jiang Qi was fortunate enough to survive the process and become a pseudo-royal lord. Thus, he had only heard of Yang Kai and how terrifying he was. He was only able to recognize Yang Kai because MOUI had once shown Yang Kai's face, an image to all the Black Ink clansmen before they were sent out. Even now, Jiang Qi could still recall MOUI's instructions. If they were to encounter this person on the battlefield, their first priority should be to flee. However, if they could not flee, they were to do their best to take on Yang Kai in groups, and under no circumstances were they to fight him alone as they would not be able to hold their own against him. At the time, Jiang Qi did not think much of it. Based on the information the Black Ink Clan received, Yang Kai was sealed up inside the universe furnace and would most likely only be able to leave the next time it opened. Thus, what were his chances of running into this human on the battlefield? All along, Jiang Qi thought that MOUI was panicking over nothing. Nevertheless, MOUI was a true royal lord, so as a pseudo-royal lord himself, he could not make any objections. Despite thinking that there was very little chance of running into the human Killing Star, Jiang Qi did not look down on Yang Kai's strength. Multiple pseudo-royal lords died at Yang Kai's hands after he became a Ninth Order master inside the universe furnace. Even a true royal lord had fallen to the killing star. None of this information had been kept a secret, so naturally, Jiang Qi heard about everything. However, he never thought that the impossible would happen right in front of him. The killing star, who was supposed to be confined to the universe furnace, had appeared on the E5 territory battlefield, and as soon as he showed up, he used some kind of mysterious ability to incapacitate Hu Yu. He has his eyes on me now. Jiang Qi felt chills running down his spine. The cold look in the eyes of his opponent made him feel as if death itself was staring at him. Just as the wheels in Jiang Qi's mind finished spinning, Yang Kai hoisted the spear in his hand and thrust it out. A torrent of spear shadows instantly loomed over Jiang Qi's head. Jiang Qi had been extremely wary of the strange river where Hu Yu had vanished, but he did not expect Yang Kai to forego using it against him. Thus, he was completely unprepared for the attack. He had no way of retaliating against the sudden attack. If he had been at his peak, he might have been able to hold out against Yang Kai for a little while, but he had been gravely injured by the purifying light that burst forth when the purifying black ink battleship exploded. Thus, he was no match at the moment. Black blood splattered everywhere as Jiang Qi gasped in agony. He stumbled backwards from the onslaught of never-ending attacks. No matter how much strength he tried to muster, he could not do anything to block his opponent. A few short breaths later, Jiang Qi froze in place, his eyes wide with terror and bitterness. Yang Kai casually raised his spear with one hand before jabbing it through Jiang Qi's chest. The spear jerked and unleashed a ferocious force that turned the pseudo-royal lord into a cloud of blood mist. It had been less than 10 breaths of time since Yang Kai's sudden appearance, but in that time, he managed to kill a pseudo-royal lord while restraining another. Meanwhile, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others had come to terms with their impending deaths and were about to make one last attempt to gravely injure their opponents. But now, they were simply standing to the side in complete shock. They were all struck with disbelief. How did he show up here? However, they quickly snapped out of it as they filled up with renewed energy. Regardless of why he came, the fact that he was here meant that the Black Ink clan in E5 territory were doomed. After dealing with the two pseudo-royal lords, Yang Kai glanced at Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others. When he confirmed that there was no threat to their lives despite their depleted strength and serious injuries, he was able to relax and nod lightly to them before his figure vanished. After witnessing Yang Kai summoning the space-time river to confine Hu Yu and slaughtering Jiang Qi right after, masters across the battlefield, be they humans or Black Ink clansmen, were shaken to their core. The sudden eruption of a Ninth Order master's strength was akin to a brilliant sun that illuminated the darkness of the chaotic battlefield. Furthermore, it was accompanied by the disturbance of the death of a pseudo-royal lord. The human spirit soared. Even though they had no clue which master had come to their aid, they knew for certain that it was a Ninth Order master. On the other hand, those from the Black Ink clan were petrified and filled with dread. Since that human killed a pseudo-royal lord that quickly, it's probably one of the two old ancestors, right? Though the other Ninth Order masters were powerful as well, they had only recently reached the Ninth Order open heaven realm, so it was impossible for them to unleash a force this imposing. The Black Ink clan masters were busy making their guesses when all of a sudden, a pseudo-royal lord's furious yet terrified roar rang out from a corner of the battlefield. Yang Kai? As soon as the pseudo-royal lord managed to get the name out, his aura vanished. No one knew what happened to him. All at once, all from the Black Ink clan fell into a stunned daze. It would not have been as serious of a situation if either Xiao Xiao or Wu Qing had come. Though these two veteran Ninth Order masters were stronger than the other Ninth Order humans, the Black Ink clan was still able to deal with them. After all, the pseudo-royal lords had a lot of experience going up against the Ninth Order masters by now. By forming a Three Fortunes formation with three pseudo-royal lords, they could put up a fight against any Ninth Order master. However, if it was Yang Kai who came, then things were going to be a lot more difficult for them. Martial Peak. Martial Peak. Chapter 5833. A show of strength. Martial Peak. The roar of shock and bewilderment echoed across the void, startling the Black Ink clan. Yang Kai's fame preceded him, and out of all the Ninth Order Masters, the Black Ink clan was most afraid of him, the one who should have been confined inside the universe furnace right now. Though they had no clue as to how he managed to escape, he did indeed show up here. Following the cry of fury and alarm, the aura of yet another pseudo-royal lord disappeared without a trace. It did not seem as if he had died. Instead, it was as though he was isolated somewhere and his aura became undetectable. Formations. Get into battle formations. A pseudo-royal lord roared. The pseudo-royal lords then swiftly withdrew from the fights they were in to gather among themselves. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order Master among their ranks, so most of the time, the pseudo-royal lords did not team up into formations. Although they could form a Three Fortunes formation, usually, they would only do so if they were under some kind of pressure from the situation they were in. They were under no such threat in E5 territory, so they mostly chose to fight alone. This allowed them to occupy the attention of even more Eighth Order Masters, and it also gave them more freedom to move around. However, a real threat had arrived and they were immediately under great pressure. So naturally, they chose to link up their auras and quickly form Three Fortunes formations. This allowed them to feel a little more secure. Nearly 20 pseudo-royal lords had been sent to E5 territory. Their high number explained why the Red Flame Army failed to claim this territory despite being a mighty army with the finest fighters and arms, assisted by numerous powerful divine spirits. Now that most of the pseudo-royal lords had formed battle formations, there were 2 of them remaining who could not form one and were stuck in an awkward predicament. A battle formation could not be formed with just 2 pseudo-royal lords, but there was no other pseudo-royal lord around to form a trio with them. It was as if they had been abandoned by their allies. They felt annoyed and resentful for having been too slow. Nevertheless, they had their wits about them still. Since they could not form a battle formation, they immediately withdrew from the battlefield and moved to the rear. Once the pseudo-royal lords had their battle formations to rely upon, they felt more confident. However, when they looked around and saw what was happening in front of them, their expressions morphed into shock and terror. Yang Kai was cutting across the battlefield without hiding himself at all. He had a long, meandering river around him that was like a massive dragon swimming through the void. Wherever he went, the great river surged and its currents washed over countless Black Ink clansmen, all of whom disappeared as a result. On the other hand, even if some humans were entangled with the captured Black Ink clansmen, they were completely unaffected. No one could stand in Yang Kai's way. Even the territory lords could not defend themselves from the rampaging river. Yang Kai was single-handedly carving out a path through the intense battlefield. What the hell is that thing? All the pseudo-royal lords were thunderstruck by the river that was circling around Yang Kai. They were formidable masters in their own right, but even though they had such power, they did not have the confidence that they could cut through the battlefield this easily. After all, the humans were not pushovers. However, Yang Kai was doing what they could not. He did not stop moving and did not have to do anything else either. He simply relied on that strange river to accomplish this feat. The pseudo-royal lords could not help but recall the information Nai had provided in the past. When Yang Kai was inside the universe furnace, he used a strange river to kill multiple pseudo-royal lords. It seemed to be a river that was formed by a multitude of Dao strengths. Falling into the river was essentially a death sentence. Yang Kai was rushing about, seemingly charging straight at the pseudo-royal lords, causing them to feel trepidatious. They knew that they could not defend themselves from Yang Kai's attacks, but as pseudo-royal lords, they could not allow themselves to flee at the mere sight of him either. After all, they should be able to put up a fight against him now. After composing themselves, the pseudo-royal lords began communicating with each other, and they soon came up with a strategy. Meanwhile, Yang Kai, who was flying across the battlefield, was feeling a little helpless. Initially, he wanted to use Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to sneak up on the pseudo-royal lords. With the difference in strength between him and a pseudo-royal lord, as well as the help of Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability, he would certainly be able to kill them off one by one. Anyone he had his eyes on would not be able to escape. He did not need to kill too many, just a third of them would do. However, he was forced to expose himself in order to save Xiao Yanghua and the others, and now that he had summoned the space-time river, there was no way he could hide his presence any longer. That being said, the space-time river proved to be highly effective on this battlefield with massive numbers on both sides. Even though the size of his space-time river could not compare with the infinite river that flowed through the universe furnace world, it was still quite expansive. Wherever the river flowed, Yang Kai could clear the place in a flash, as all from the Black Ink clansmen would be sucked into the river. With so many violent Dao strengths filling the space-time river, most of the Black Ink clansmen died the moment they fell into it. Even the few stronger ones could only barely survive for a few breaths. In just a few moments, Yang Kai had cut across the entire battlefield. He instantly saw 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation charging over to him, while even more of them were trying to come around from the sides. Yang Kai did not care about the pseudo-royal lords who were taking the longer route. Instead, he met the 3 in front of him head-on. Chills ran down the spines of the 3. It took a lot of courage for them to face off against the killing star. They were only able to muster up the courage to do so because they were now pseudo-royal lords and had allies of similar strength to back them up. When they saw Yang Kai rushing towards them, they had to force down their urge to run away as they desperately began hurling powerful secret techniques at him. Yang Kai did not attempt to dodge these attacks at all. The dark bolts of light all shot into the space-time river, causing the waves to become even more turbulent as it churned with great ferocity, but Yang Kai remained unscathed. The distance between them continued to shorten, and all of a sudden, Yang Kai lunged forward. He abruptly appeared near the 3 pseudo-royal lords and eyed them coldly as he sneered. "You're quite bold." He made a grabbing motion and was somehow able to hold the space-time river in his hand. With a quick, forceful flick, the great river seemed to turn into a long whip that closed in around the 3 pseudo-royal lords. They never thought that the space-time river could take on a new form in such a strange way. As they were caught off guard, they could not avoid the river whip. The Dao strength swirled around them and cut into their flesh and souls. Their battle formation, which had been weak in the first place, instantly crumbled apart. An enormous wave crashed down upon the 3 pseudo-royal lords, and they were all sucked into the space-time river. Filled with terror, they immediately tried to resist and drag themselves out of the space-time river, but it was as if the waters had turned into quicksand. No matter how hard they struggled, it did them no good. Waves of Dao strengths continued to crash down on them and, one by one, their struggling silhouettes disappeared into the depths of the river. After a brief encounter with Yang Kai, all 3 pseudo-royal lords vanished, and there was no way of ascertaining whether or not they were even alive or dead. When the other pseudo-royal lords saw what happened, their hair stood on end and they were chilled to the bone. After many years of battle experience, the Black Ink clan confirmed that a battle formation of 3 pseudo-royal lords was powerful enough to take on a 9th Order Master. All of the current 9th Order Masters, be it the new ones or the older, more experienced ones, could not do much against 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation. Even though a trio of pseudo-royal lords would not be able to defeat a 9th Order Master either, they were still enough to keep the latter occupied. The pseudo-royal lords were fully aware of Yang Kai's terrifying reputation, and they had also done their best to avoid underestimating him. Thus, when they noticed his presence, they all abandoned their original opponents and formed battle formations before attempting to take him on. They wanted to rely on the strength of all the pseudo-royal lords combined to deal with Yang Kai. They knew Yang Kai had his space secret techniques which allowed him to escape from a losing fight, but they were also willing to accept the possibility of simply driving him off. The pseudo-royal lords never imagined that Yang Kai's formidability in battle and the horror of going up against him would far exceed their estimations. As soon as the 3 pseudo-royal lords crossed paths with him, they were immediately lost to the great river, their fates completely unknown. The pseudo-royal lords began wondering whether they could truly take on such an opponent. Yang Kai did not waste any time. He swiveled around and began charging at another group of 3 pseudo-royal lords who no longer had the guts to face him head-on. They had just seen what happened to their fellow pseudo-royal lords earlier, and were not keen on sharing the same end. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the three pseudo-royal lords split up and started fleeing in three different directions. Yang Kai was amused as he roared, "Where are you trying to run?" He dragged the space-time river with one hand and rushed after one of the pseudo-royal lords. When the latter turned around and saw this, he immediately panicked. The three pseudo-royal lords had scattered to escape on their own, so he had no idea why he was the unlucky one who was now targeted by the killing star. He could not hesitate for even a single moment as he quickly used a life-saving secret technique, spitting out a huge mouthful of black blood as his speed dramatically increased. All at once, the pseudo-royal lords' attempt to surround and confine Yang Kai had been negated. They lost all their will to fight after seeing the first group of pseudo-royal lords vanishing into the space-time river. The pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai had his eye on was not the only one who was trying to flee now. All the other pseudo-royal lords were running off as well. They were afraid that Yang Kai would turn around and hunt them down next. As Yang Kai went after the pseudo-royal lord, he had to focus on using his might to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Meanwhile, out on the battlefield, without the pseudo-royal lords to aid in combat and lead the battle, the Black Ink clan army was severely weakened. The Eighth Order Masters and the Divine Spirits naturally seized this chance to cut into the enemy lines. Soon, the battle that had been a virtual stalemate for years dramatically tipped in favor of one side. The humans had the upper hand, whereas the Black Ink clan was losing miserably. The leaders of the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies made the most of this opportunity. Orders went out to all four armies that made up the Red Flame Army, and they charged onto the battlefield to secure a landslide victory by wiping out the Black Ink clan. In just half a day, the Black Ink clan army had been routed and the scattered handfuls of survivors quickly retreated towards their stronghold. Alas, the humans were not going to let this chance slip away from them. The commanders made the call, and the Red Flame Army hunted down the remaining Black Ink clansmen. They were able to slaughter many along the way, and Black Ink strength that escaped from the dead corpses seemed to fill nearly half the void. It was an overwhelming victory for the Red Flame Army, and they only stopped the chase once they were half a day's travel away from the Black Ink clan's main base. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5834, Slaughter, Marshall Peak. As the battle came to an end, the Red Flame Army at last tasted victory that had long eluded them. Many lives had been sacrificed in the process, but even so, they could not hide their joy. The army commanders gave the order and everyone began cleaning up the battlefield. Universe fragments were dragged over and a temporary base was created in the void. The human race army gathered at the spot which was directly opposite the Black Ink clan's main base in the distance. The two bases were only half a day's travel apart, so the stronger masters with keener eyesight could even see what was happening inside their enemy's stronghold. They could tell that the Black Ink clan was on high alert. Now and then, the aura of a pseudo-royal lord would flicker and flash. It was as if the Black Ink clan was trying to scare the humans, but that only proved that they were putting up a strong front. Throughout the war, the Red Flame Army reclaimed many great territories, but they faced the most resistance in E5 territory by far. In the previous great territories, the Black Ink clan rarely engaged the humans in large-scale battles. It was almost as if they surrendered without much of a fight. The Red Flame Army had suffered many losses throughout the decade of war in E5 territory, but in the battle today, they managed to deal a crushing blow to the Black Ink clan army and slaughter many of their masters. The humans were thrilled, and they were even more excited because it seemed as if a Ninth Order master was joining them. All along, the Red Flame Army and 5 other armies did not have a Ninth Order master assuming command, leaving them deeply envious of the Azure Sun Army, the Profound Nether Army, and others with Ninth Order masters leading them. The presence or absence of a Ninth Order master made things feel entirely different. Having a Ninth Order master made them feel as if they were children who were well loved and cared for, and not having one made them feel like orphans that no one cared about. Nevertheless, they soon regrouped and prepared themselves for the next battle. On a universe fragment that was just 10,000 kilometers away from the temporary base, Yang Kai sat cross-legged with the space-time river weaving around him. The long river was churning with a violent undercurrent that sent tumultuous waves crashing all over. This could not be helped as the river was currently suppressing 5 pseudo-royal lords. Even with the power that Yang Kai had now, this was his limit. During the battle, he first used the space-time river to restrain Hu Yu before killing Jiang Qi, who was already heavily injured. Then, he used the space-time river to suck up the 3 pseudo-royal lords who charged at him. He already felt the pressure when there were 4 of them inside there. The pseudo-royal lords would not just stand idly by and allow themselves to die inside the space-time river. They kept struggling relentlessly, and Yang Kai had to dedicate a large amount of his strength and focus to keep them suppressed. Witnessing Yang Kai suppress and capture 3 pseudo-royal lords who had been in a battle formation in one go, the rest of the pseudo-royal lords became terrified and began fleeing. In reality, if they had chosen to gang up on Yang Kai at that moment, he would have had to flee from them at once too. Approximately 2/3 of Yang Kai's strength was currently being used to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Even he could not hold his own against that many formidable opponents. Still, the Black Ink clan had never witnessed such a bizarre method before. They were frightened by the way the 3 pseudo-royal lords disappeared after simply coming face-to-face with Yang Kai. Thus, knowing how fearsome Yang Kai was, they did not have the guts to stick around anymore, and they immediately ran off. The last pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai targeted did not manage to escape either. Yang Kai had purposely delayed for a little while before swallowing that pseudo-royal lord up with the river, allowing the others to think they had gotten away on their own as opposed to him not being able to go after them. Therefore, there were 5 pseudo-royal lords sealed up inside the space-time river right now, and around 4/5 of Yang Kai's strength was tied up suppressing them. If that had not been the case, he would have charged straight into the Black Ink clan's stronghold by now rather than letting them delay the inevitable. Silhouettes began moving swiftly from the humans' temporary base towards Yang Kai's position. The 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army's Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies were in the lead, and they were followed by over a dozen powerful divine spirits. When this group came over and saw Yang Kai with the space-time river around him, reverence colored their expressions. "Greetings, sir." Everyone bowed in greeting. Yang Kai smiled and raised his hand, at ease. Zuoqiu Yanghua was pale-faced as he and the other 8th Order Masters had been injured during their earlier fight when Jiang Qi and Hu Yu came to attack them. They would have surely met their doom if Yang Kai had not come to their rescue at the last moment. Now that Yang Kai had summoned the various army and division commanders, Zuoqiu Yanghua did not waste any time recuperating from his injuries and immediately rushed over with everyone else. In terms of age and generational seniority, Zuoqiu Yanghua was far above Yang Kai. However, in this chaotic world where many geniuses were born, a person's strength determined their authority. Zuoqiu Yang thanked Yang Kai for saving his life before asking, "Why did you call us over, sir?" "To kill the enemy." Yang Kai smiled faintly. Zuoqiu Yanghua immediately turned his eyes to the space-time river. He already guessed as much when he came over and spotted the space-time river still flowing about, and Yang Kai's words confirmed it for him. He was not the only one who figured this out, as it was far too obvious. All of them could see that a struggling figure would occasionally be visible within the space-time river. It was clear that the pseudo-royal lords who were confined inside were not about to go down without a fight. It dawned on the crowd that though the strange river was useful when it came to restraining enemies, it was not strong enough to take the lives of pseudo-royal lords. There was no reason for them to hesitate, so the 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits immediately formed battle formations and prepared themselves. Once they were all in position, Yang Kai raised his hand, and in the very next breath, a figure stormed back out of the space-time river. It was Hu Yu, the first one who had been suppressed inside the river. As soon as he appeared, brutal attacks were launched at him from all directions before he could even grasp what was happening. Hu Yu was terrified and quickly tried to defend himself, but how could he react in time? Even though a pseudo-royal lord was immensely powerful, the combined strength of nearly 100 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits was not something he was capable of resisting even at his peak. Thus, in the face of the avalanche of attacks, Hu Yu exploded into a cloud of blood before he could even cry out in agony. Many of the humans were stunned at this sight. After so many years of battling against the Black Ink Clan, it was their first time killing a pseudo-royal lord, and they had done it so easily too. They could not help but feel as if they were dreaming. Then again, even a true Ninth Order master would not necessarily be able to withstand the attacks of that many masters, let alone a pseudo-royal lord. Hu Yu was dead, but Yang Kai did not stop there. The space-time river rippled once more and another figure stumbled out. Similarly, he was greeted with a barrage of ferocious attacks from all directions. The Black Ink Clan's base camp was situated on a large universe fragment that was covered in black ink nests. Their remaining forces had all gathered together, and their hearts were heavy with dread. The Killing Star was back. In this battle, the Black Ink Clan lost 6 pseudo-royal lords and countless other masters. Even though they managed to flee back to their stronghold, the pseudo-royal lords did not feel secure at all. The thought of Yang Kai's earlier display made them extremely fearful. The strange river seemed to contain a mysterious power that they could not deal with. Now that the army had suffered a crushing defeat, the pseudo-royal lords were beside themselves with worry as they did not know what to do next. Previously, the pseudo-royal lords, who numbered almost 20 in total, had gathered here under Amo Naye's orders to decimate the Red Flame Army by killing as many human race masters as possible. Everything had been going according to plan. The Black Ink Clan had been in control of the battle as they had the strength of a large number of pseudo-royal lords backing them, so they were certain they would achieve their goal in just a few more years. However, everything fell apart thanks to the arrival of a single human. The pseudo-royal lords who fled back to their stronghold held a simple discussion. They quickly decided to send news regarding Yang Kai's arrival back to the Noreturn Pass. In reality, they wanted to immediately retreat, but they dared not leave the area without Amo Naye's orders, so they had no choice but to group together and watch out for any possible attacks on them. When Sir Amo Naye came back from the Universe Furnace, he brought back some information regarding Yang Kai, including information about that peculiar river. Sir Amo Naye said the river seems to be made out of Yang Kai's Dao strengths. It can be used to attack or defend, and is incredibly effective when used to restrain opponents. So, even though they were captured, they could still be alive. All was quiet and somber when a pseudo-royal lord suddenly spoke up. He had an ox head with 2 horns sticking out. It was as if he did not completely assume human form yet. They've fallen into the hands of the Killing Star. Does being dead or not make a difference? One of the pseudo-royal lords retorted darkly. What I meant is, since they're not dead, should we try to rescue them? The ox-head pseudo-royal lord asked. The pseudo-royal lords all turned towards the ox-head pseudo-royal lord at once. It was as if they were staring at a lunatic. We barely managed to escape from that Killing Star. It's good enough that he didn't chase us down. So how can you even think about trying to pick a fight with him? Do you have a death wish? They were all once innate territory lords who became pseudo-royal lords with the help of the source fusion technique. They had all experienced a narrow brush with death in the process, so they cherished their lives even more than the ordinary Black Ink clansmen. None of them dared to agree with the Oxhead pseudo-royal lord's suggestion. The Oxhead pseudo-royal lord frowned. Although Yang Kai is strong, if this many of us pseudo-royal lords join hands, I don't think we need to fear him. I studied the situation earlier. Even though that river is strange, it's not impossible to get around it. Yang Kai should be at his limit, keeping 5 pseudo-royal lords confined inside the river. Jiang Qi was killed, but Hu Yu and the others are still alive. If we don't rescue them, how are we to explain ourselves to Sir Amo Yu and Sir Amo Naye if they question us about this? The pseudo-royal lords felt exasperated by what he was saying, but they could not refute him either. Nevertheless, none of them felt willing to go up against the Killing Star. Furthermore, rescuing them is also a way for us to protect ourselves. By rescuing them, we will strengthen our side and stand a better chance if we must fight Yang Kai in the future, the Oxhead pseudo-royal lord added. One of the pseudo-royal lords agreed. He has a point. If we don't rescue them, we'll be in a disastrous situation the moment Yang Kai comes after us. Thus, the dozen or so pseudo-royal lords were caught between 2 hard choices. On one hand, they did not dare to mount a rescue attempt. The bizarre tactics that Yang Kai had previously used were far too frightening. On the other hand, if they did not try to rescue the captured pseudo-royal lords, those 5 were surely doomed, and once Yang Kai was freed up again, he would turn his attention back on the rest of them. However, before the pseudo-royal lords could come to an agreement on what to do, the extinguishing of a top master's vitality reverberated across the void. Even though there was quite a distance between the two bases, the pseudo-royal lords picked up on the commotion with crystal clarity. That was Hu Yu. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord turned in the direction the commotion had come from, and he could not help but sigh. There's no point going over now. Since the humans had started their slaughter, it was already too late. True enough, they began sensing the deaths of even more pseudo-royal lords. Each death caused a huge disturbance, and in short order, the fallout occurred 5 times. This meant that the 5 captured pseudo-royal lords had all been executed. All at once, the surviving pseudo-royal lords could not help but feel grief over the lives that had been lost, as it could have very easily been them who suffered this fate. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5835. Hit and Run. Marshall Peak. After sensing the deaths of 5 pseudo-royal lords, the rest of the pseudo-royal lords who had been lucky enough to survive huddled together on the universe fragment where the Black Ink Clan's base was. It was hard to describe what they were feeling as questions ran through their minds. Isn't the killing star supposed to be confined inside the universe furnace? Why did he show up here out of the blue? How did he manage to get out? Regardless of how Yang Kai, who was now a 9th Order Master, managed to leave the universe furnace, he was bound to be a great threat to the Black Ink Clan. Upon showing up at E5 territory, he swung the battle wildly in the humans' favor, and the Black Ink Clan army suffered tremendous losses. The deaths of their clansmen filled their hearts with dread. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord squared his chest and said, Yang Kai is back and none of us can challenge him one-on-one. Even if we form battle formations, we might not be able to gain the upper hand when he has that strange river of his. Now that Hu Yu and the rest are dead, Yang Kai will surely seek us out. From now on, we must always travel in groups. No one is to move around alone. We cannot let him get even the slightest chance of attacking us. As for what we're going to do next, well, let's wait for Surimo Naye's orders. What do you say? All the pseudo-royal lords swiftly nodded in agreement. Grouping up was the only way they could feel a little more secure when they were up against an opponent as strong as Yang Kai and all his peculiar methods. Now that they were all on the same page, the pseudo-royal lords did not dare to venture away from each other. They gathered together and used their divine senses to scan the surrounding area, constantly keeping their guard up against Yang Kai. Back at the humans' temporary base, after killing the 5 pseudo-royal lords who had been captured, Yang Kai flicked the space-time river one last time and countless dead bodies were thrown out. These were the other Black Ink clansmen who had been pulled into the space-time river earlier. Pseudo-royal lords who were caught inside the space-time river could still use their immense power to defend themselves from the torrent of Dao strengths, but the others who were not as powerful could not do likewise. Even the territory lords who had fallen into the river could only survive for a few moments, while the weaker ones died as soon as they were sucked in. During Yang Kai's dash across the battlefield, over 1 million Black Ink Clan soldiers had been swept into the space-time river. The dead bodies that fell out created a mountainous pile that made the 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits feel their scalps numbing. They sighed in awe. Yang Kai had already been known for his fearsomeness when he was just an 8th Order Master. Now that he was a 9th Order Master, they were certain that he was the most powerful master among the humans, as they doubted that any other 9th Order Master had the ability to decimate as many enemies as he did. Wait here, everyone. I'll be right back, Yang Kai instructed, putting away the space-time river before standing up and taking a step and vanishing. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others had been waiting to ask Yang Kai what they should do next, but since he had given the word, they could only wait patiently, though they were puzzled as to what Yang Kai was doing. However, they soon found out what Yang Kai was up to. A great chaotic explosion burst forth from the direction of the Black Ink Clan's base. Everyone's attention was drawn to it as they saw flashes of secret techniques shooting in all directions. They even heard the sounds of Yang Kai's laughter and the pseudo-royal lord's roars of fear and anger. The Eighth Order Masters and Divine Spirits were dumbstruck. He went to attack the Black Ink Clan's base alone? Just how fearless is he? They could not help but feel nervous on Yang Kai's behalf. Even though Yang Kai had exhibited unparalleled strength in the earlier battle by killing a pseudo-royal lord and capturing 5 others, the Black Ink Clan still had over a dozen other pseudo-royal lords. Now that they had all gathered at their stronghold, they would surely be vigilant against any possible attacks. Would Yang Kai really be able to do something by charging over there alone? The pseudo-royal lords were not pushovers, after all. The great success of the earlier battle could be largely attributed to the Black Ink Clan's lack of defense against Yang Kai. It was their first time dealing with Yang Kai as a Ninth Order Master, and they had no experience handling that strange river. However, now that the Black Ink Clan Masters were on guard against Yang Kai, he might not be able to attack them successfully. Even though the Eighth Order Masters and the Divine Spirits did not think Yang Kai's attempt would be fruitful, they still felt reverence and were motivated by his drive. It was unlikely that any other Ninth Order Master would be as bold and courageous as him. Meanwhile, the space-time river was whipping around the universe fragment where the Black Ink Clan's base was, causing a huge ruckus. Despite losing 6 pseudo-royal lords, the Black Ink Clan still had over a dozen of them who were now gathered in one place, banking on their strength and numbers. Furthermore, they were taking precautions against the possibility of a sneak attack from Yang Kai, so they were highly vigilant. Never would they have thought that even with such stringent defense measures, Yang Kai would still be able to pop up right next to them without them noticing his approach. The pseudo-royal lord's strict security measures had been entirely useless as no one noticed Yang Kai's before he showed himself. The pseudo-royal lords only noticed the killing star's presence when he suddenly showed up behind a pseudo-royal lord and summoned that strange river. Nevertheless, it was too late. The pseudo-royal lord was engulfed by the river, and as the waves crashed down on him, he could only struggle for a brief moment before disappearing into the water. All at once, amid the cries of fury and terror, attacks were launched at Yang Kai from all directions. It had been less than an hour since the Black Ink Clan army fled back to their base, but another fight was now breaking out right on their doorstep. However, the fight ended just as abruptly as it started. It had been less than 10 breaths of time in total since Yang Kai launched his sneak attack, but by now, he had already run off with that strange river of his, taking 2 pseudo-royal lords with him who had disappeared into the river. The remaining pseudo-royal lords were shocked and furious as they stared in the direction where Yang Kai had fled, but none of them dared to go after him as they were terrified they would share the same fate as their less fortunate comrades. The Oxhead pseudo-royal lord had a look of lingering fear too. He had also been swept into the space-time river and had nearly failed to struggle back out of it. He had to thank his fellow pseudo-royal lords for attacking Yang Kai so fiercely that the killing star could not focus on keeping him suppressed inside the river, which enabled his escape. Otherwise, Yang Kai would have been able to capture 3 pseudo-royal lords instead of just 2. After experiencing this abrupt sneak attack, all of the pseudo-royal lords were grim-faced. They had all heard many stories about Yang Kai. When Yang Kai was an 8th Order Master, his biggest trump card was his space secret technique, allowing him to escape from any opponent he could not defeat. Now that he was a 9th Order Master, it was one thing for him to be able to both fight or flee as he wished, but what was most unnerving was the fact that he could move around so stealthily. Even now, none of the pseudo-royal lords could figure out how Yang Kai evaded their senses. None of them had picked up on the slightest hint of peculiarity before Yang Kai made his move. Not only was he adept at both fighting and fleeing, but he also had an even more mysterious and powerful secret technique that allowed him to conceal his movements. An opponent like him was far too terrifying. Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability was even able to evade the detection of royal lords and chaos spirit kings to a great extent. This divine ability in the hands of Yang Kai only served to make him even more formidable. It would be more surprising if the pseudo-royal lords could detect his presence. All of a sudden, the Oxhead pseudo-royal lord said, "Let's withdraw our forces." It was not safe for them to stay any longer. No matter how many precautions they took, all of the pseudo-royal lords could very well die if Yang Kai launched a few more sneak attacks. Under these circumstances, Their only choice was to evacuate, and the quicker the better. None of the remaining pseudo-royal lords dared to oppose his suggestion, as all of them quickly nodded in agreement. They had been planning on waiting for Amon Naya's orders, but there was no point in waiting now. If they stuck around any longer, there was a high chance that the entire army would be massacred. Back on the other universe fragment, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were staring in shock at Yang Kai. Although he looked disheveled, they still felt nothing but respect for him. Even Yang Kai had a hard time fighting over a dozen pseudo-royal lords head-on. Fortunately, he was a divine dragon and had thick skin and strong flesh which could withstand quite a beating. He managed to endure the brunt of the attacks, though he was somewhat disappointed that one of the three pseudo-royal lords who had been drawn into the river managed to escape. Sir. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others quickly went over to Yang Kai, keeping an eye on the space-time river as it circled around the ladder. Yang Kai nodded. Same as before. All were thrilled. He succeeded. Without even a moment of hesitation, they immediately gathered their strength and waited. Just as before, Yang Kai released a pseudo-royal lord from the space-time river, and the latter was greeted by a flurry of fierce attacks. The two pseudo-royal lords who had been captured did not even get the chance to fight back as they both died one after the other. The Eighth Order Masters and Divine Spirits were ecstatic. Including the 6 from earlier, the Black Ink clan lost a total of 8 pseudo-royal lords in E5 territory. Since the humans and the Black Ink clan entered a state of all-out war, the humans had not been able to kill as many pseudo-royal lords as they did today, even when combining the achievements of all 12 armies. It was not because the other Ninth Order Masters were weak, it was just that the pseudo-royal lords were formidable opponents too, and could still stay alive even when they were up against the Ninth Order Masters. Furthermore, the other Ninth Order Masters did not have all the mysterious and profound means that Yang Kai had. If Yang Kai had gone off to hunt down pseudo-royal lords by himself, he would not have been able to kill this many of them in such a short span either. However, by relying on the space-time river, he could capture some pseudo-royal lords and bring them back to let everyone work together to finish them off. This made things much easier. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others still barely believed the situation happening before their eyes. They never thought there would come a time when they could kill off pseudo-royal lords this easily. Yang Kai sensed their eager gazes and knew what they were after. They wanted Yang Kai to make a few more trips to the Black Ink clan's base. Even if he only brought back 2 per trip, they would still be able to slaughter all of the pseudo-royal lords if he made 6 or 7 trips. Yang Kai, however, just chuckled. It's not possible anymore. The Black Ink clan seems to be withdrawing their army. The remaining pseudo-royal lords would have fled by now. Withdrawing their army? Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were stunned as they stared off into the distance at the Black Ink clan's base. True enough, once they focused, they could see the bustle of activity at the Black Ink clan's base. A large number of Black Ink clansmen were rushing towards the territory gate to retreat to the adjacent Great Territory. It was less of an orderly withdrawal than a rush to escape. How could the humans just let them go, though? The two armies had been clashing at E5 territory for over a decade, and countless humans had died in the process. The bloody feud between them made it impossible for the Red Flame Army to simply allow the Black Ink clan to retreat in peace. Moreover, the Black Ink clan army's large-scale retreat was a great chance for the humans to hunt them down and bolster their victory with even more kills. With that thought in mind, the army commanders exchanged glances and instantly picked up on each other's intentions. The army commander of the Southern Army patted Zuoqiu Yanghua's shoulder and gave him a meaningful look. "You're injured, senior brother, so you should stay here and tend to your wounds. You can keep Sir Yang company and chat with him for a bit. Leave the enemy to us." Zuoqiu Yanghua got the message and nodded. "Good. I'll handle the rear this time." Soon, the orders went down and the human race masters who had only just finished setting up their camps flew off again. This time, the 4 armies rushed straight towards the Black Ink clan's base as yet another battle was about to begin. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5836, Crushing the Enemy. Marshall Peak. The Black Ink clan had set up their base in front of a territory gate that led to a nearby Great Territory, which made things convenient in the event that they had to make a hasty retreat. Now that the pseudo-royal lords had been scared off by Yang Kai and had run away, the rest of the Black Ink Clan army followed suit. That being said, the Black Ink Clan army had massive numbers, and it was impossible for all of them to retreat at once. Thus, even though the two camps had been half a day's worth of travel apart, the Red Flame army would still be able to score significant kills if they rushed over now. The Red Flame army were not at all afraid of a Black Ink Clan army without any pseudo-royal lords among them. They knew for certain that it was going to be a one-sided slaughter. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the other injured Eighth Order Masters of the Eastern Army looked on with delight as they watched the Red Flame army fly off into the distance. It had been 10 long years, and the Red Flame army was finally able to claim E5 territory. However, the most important aspect to celebrate now was the fact that Yang Kai's appearance led to the Black Ink Clan suffering significant losses among their top masters. The Black Ink Clan would deeply feel this loss for quite some time. Many years ago, the humans figured out what the Black Ink Clan were up to and changed their strategy as well. Reclaiming great territories was no longer their goal. Instead, they aimed to kill the Black Ink Clan's strongest masters, as that was the only way for them to weaken the Black Ink Clan. Everything that the Red Flame army accomplished now was thanks to a single man. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were exhilarated at the thought that the Red Flame army might finally be able to count a Ninth Order Master among them, and one as powerful as Yang Kai to boot. "Sir, did the Supreme Headquarters send you over to aid us?" Zuoqiu Yanghua asked as he withdrew his gaze from the impending battle. "Indeed," Yang Kai nodded. "Senior Brother Mi said that the battle was becoming perilous in E5 territory, so he asked me to make the trip." After seeing the looks of joy on everyone's faces, Yang Kai could more or less figure out what they were thinking, so he chuckled and added, "But I won't be staying with the Red Flame army." The Eighth Order Master's delight turned to shock as one of them asked, "What do you mean, sir?" It seemed as if things were not quite what they expected. "We have 12 armies, but there aren't enough Ninth Order Masters to assume command of all of them," Yang Kai explained. "That's why I'll be moving around the 6 without a Ninth Order Master to support them. Anyone who runs into any difficulty can ask me for help, and I'll head over at once. As you know, I'm proficient in the use of space principles and can travel at great speeds. This is an advantage of mine that the other Ninth Order Masters can't match." Having heard what Yang Kai said, the Eighth Order Masters fell deep in thought. Although they yearned for Yang Kai to stay and assume command of the Red Flame army, doing so would be too unfair to the other 5 armies without a Ninth Order Master, as they too were under a lot of pressure. An immeasurable number of humans had sacrificed their lives throughout the many years of war against the Black Ink Clan, and every human hated the Black Ink Clan to the core. The humans could not waste any amount of strength they had that could be used to overpower the Black Ink Clan. Therefore, though they were a little disappointed after hearing what Yang Kai said, they could still accept it as they were leaders of an army and wise enough to know what was best. Zuoqiu Yanghua nodded and said, "You're right, sir. Having you take the trouble to move around more is the only way to minimize our losses." Yang Kai smiled and assured, "You don't need to worry. It's been so many years, so I'm sure the next generation of Ninth Order Masters will come along soon enough. In the future, there'll be more than enough Ninth Order Masters to go around." His words lifted everyone's spirits. Just as Yang Kai said, the prolonged war against the Black Ink Clan had given the human race masters enough time to grow and rise up. Right now, every army had a group of talented masters who were at the peak of their cultivation and had the chance to become Ninth Order Masters. Perhaps some pleasant surprises would happen with these talented youths. When the time came, the humans would see a sudden jump in the number of Ninth Order Masters. There would surely be enough of them to lead more than 20 armies, let alone the 12 they had now. The humans would no longer be troubled by a lack of Ninth Order Masters. Zuoqiu Yanghua then frowned. The Black Ink Clan should also be having territory lords becoming royal lords soon. There are now a lot of acquired territory lords too, all of whom have the ability to become royal lords. It's easier for the Black Ink Clan to ascend to a new realm as well. Who knows what kind of heritage they have now after so many years. It's a shame that the territory lords who have a chance to become royal lords have all been kept within the Noritern Pass to grow with the help of the high-rank Black Ink nests there. The humans have no way of gathering any intelligence on them. Upon hearing this, Yang Kai raised his brow. What a coincidence. I was just planning on making a trip over there to take a look. You're heading to the no-return pass, sir? Zuoqiu Yanghua asked, startled. That's right, Yang Kai affirmed. I'm heading over to bring something back. He was perfectly calm and relaxed, but the Eighth Order masters froze in shock as they exchanged glances. Deep down inside, they were all in awe of just how bold Yang Kai was. None of the other Ninth Order masters would ever think of doing something like that, but on second thought, even when Yang Kai was still an Eighth Order master, he had already gone to the no-return pass to cause trouble for the Black Ink Clan. Now that he was a Ninth Order master, it would only be easier for him, and it was unlikely for him to get into any real danger. In any case, they were not in a position to worry about a Ninth Order master's safety. Be careful, sir, Zuoqiu Yanghua said seriously. Yang Kai nodded and instructed them, after reclaiming E5 territory, stay here for a while and reorganize yourselves. Wait for orders from the Supreme Headquarters to see what the next step is going to be. Yes, sir. The group of Eighth Order masters promised. Even if Yang Kai had not said anything, they would not have attempted anything on their own accord either. The Supreme Headquarters was in charge of directing all of the armies. Even though each army seemed to be fighting independently, in reality, they were able to provide each other with some level of support thanks to centralized coordination. If any one army moved too far ahead and broke off contact from the rest, they would be in a terrible situation if the Black Ink Clan seized that opportunity to target them. Yang Kai did not stick around to say anything else. He got to his feet and dashed off into the void while Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others saw him off. Over at the territory gate, the Black Ink Clan army was hurriedly evacuating. The pseudo-royal lords had been the first to flee, and most of the territory lords sensed that things were not looking good for the Black Ink Clan and had fled as well. The Black Ink Clan army was akin to a headless chicken as they were without a clear leader. Even though a fair number of territory lords had stayed back to keep things in order, it was hard for them to maintain any semblance of it as the army was in a state of disarray. Moreover, when they realized that the Red Flame army was coming over to attack them, the situation became even more chaotic. Though the humans would have to travel for half a day, the territory gate was only so big, so there was a limit to how many could pass through at a time. Half a day was not nearly enough time for the Black Ink Clan army to retreat as a whole. At least half of them would have to stay back to keep the humans occupied in order to give the rest a chance to escape. Thus, a few territory lords began organizing the troops, and most of the expendable Black Ink Clansmen had been left behind to delay the enemy, while the stronger masters and those with more potential were allowed to leave first. Just as soon as they finished making their arrangements, though, a powerful aura began rapidly approaching them. The aura was accompanied by a brilliant light that seemed to leave a dazzling trail against the darkness of the void. "It's Yang Kai!" a territory lord screamed in terror. Every single Black Ink Clansman feared the Killing Star, and just a while ago, he was able to sneak into their camp and capture 2 pseudo-royal lords alive. It had not been long since then, but he was already coming at them again. He was simply relentless. Upon noticing this, the territory lords who stayed back to keep the army in order could not hold still. They could not bother about anyone else anymore as they started fleeing towards the territory gate in a bid to escape as soon as possible. All at once, the already disorderly Black Ink Clan army descended into utter chaos. The sound of rushing water was heard as Yang Kai summoned the space-time river. The many Dao strengths surged with the waves and crashed down on the Black Ink Clan army. None could stop it as entire swaths of Black Ink Clansmen were instantly swept up and sunk into the space-time river, where they were immediately killed. Yang Kai kept pushing forward as his space-time river continued to rampage along. The Black Ink Clansmen who were sucked into the river were instantly tossed out again, but they had all lost their vitality. There was no pseudo-royal lord around, and the Black Ink Clan army did not even have innate territory lords leading them. It was impossible to imagine the damage and deaths that a single Ninth Order master could inflict on them now. Although some of the Black Ink Clansmen tried to fight back, their efforts were meaningless. Their attacks did not even manage to reach Yang Kai. Some were absorbed by the space-time river, while others were deflected by the twisted space-time around it. In just a few moments, Yang Kai arrived at the territory gate and rushed headlong into it. The moment he entered the territory gate, the once stable portal started shaking violently. It was as if the territory gate was about to shatter as void cracks weaved across its surface. Many of the fleeing Black Ink clansmen could not stop in time and crashed into the shattered space only to be instantly slashed to pieces. Many more rushed in, but they fell dead the moment they touched the territory gate. Some of the territory lords finally realized what was happening. Yangkai had done something to the territory gate, so they could no longer use it. It would have been hard for anyone else to do such a thing. Territory gates had existed since ancient times and had always been an extremely stable passageway between great territories. However, for someone like Yang Kai, who was a master of the Tao of space, it was easy enough for him to turn the territory gate into a death trap. At this point, his mastery of the Tao of space far exceeded what he had before he entered the universe furnace. This allowed him to kill many enemies without even having to make a move personally. The territory lords who chose to hang back were sorely regretting their decision now. If they had known this would happen, they would have fled with the pseudo-royal lords. However, at the time, they had been feeling lucky about their chances, and it took a lot of effort for them to gather the soldiers they had under their command, so they were reluctant to simply abandon them. None of them expected this cruel twist of fate. They could no longer use the territory gate, and the Red Flame Army was rapidly closing in. Those who had already gone through the territory gate had managed to escape, but the rest of the Black Ink clan army who remained behind did not have anywhere to run. Though they were still massive in numbers, without any pseudo-royal lords and only a few territory lords, they were not a match for the Red Flame Army that was hungry for slaughter. It was only a matter of time before they were all killed. Thus, they began to drown in their own sorrow. The Killing Star had used a simple trick to guarantee the deaths of millions of the Black Ink clansmen. They lamented his cruelty. In the distance, the leaders of the Red Flame Army had seen this scene playing out in front of them. Initially, they were rushing over as fast as they could as they were afraid that the Black Ink clan army would have left through the territory gate before they could arrive. However, the territory gate had been turned into a deathly trap now, and the Black Ink clan army had no way out. They were stuck here. Since that was the case, the humans no longer had to make a mad dash and instead began to form coherent formations as they proceeded steadily. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5837. Head about to explode. Marshall Peak. The Black Ink clan had claimed the no-return pass for many years now. It had been thousands of years since the human race army withdrew, and after being in the Black Ink clan's possession all these years, this place that once belonged to the humans was now the Black Ink clan's stronghold and core base. All of the high-rank Black Ink nests had been gathered here, along with countless mid-rank Black Ink nests. A large number of Black Ink clansmen stood guard, including the only two true royal lords. Of the two royal lords, Mou did not take charge of things. Ever since he got Mou Nai to help him deal with the Black Ink clan's matters, he spent nearly all of his time inside his Black Ink nest, strengthening himself. It had been ages since he last fought against a human, and no one knew just how strong he was now. News of the situation on each battlefield was transmitted back to the no-return pass through the Black Ink nests. Mou Nai was inside a grand hall, reading the reports sent in from all the different places. His long bout of gloominess finally eased when he saw the humans' casualties across all the fronts. Previously, he had mounted an attack on Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing to help the Black Ink giant spirit god regain its freedom. He thought it would have been an extremely easy task, but alas, the humans summoned a powerful weapon in the form of a real giant spirit god. Not only did he fail in his mission, but he also freed up the two veteran Ninth Order masters. As for the Black Ink giant spirit god that he had been banking his hopes on, the newly summoned giant spirit god kept it occupied. Thus, the plan backfired on him. Whenever Mou Nai recalled this, his heart would throb in pain. It was as if anything he did would end in defeat if Yang Kai was involved. After returning from the failure of that incident, Mou had given Mou Nai a harsh scolding. Thankfully, Mou Nai was also a true royal lord now, and Mou could not actually do anything to him, but even so, it was enough to make him depressed. In recent years, Mou Nai did not get personally involved in the fighting. He simply stood guard at the Noreturn Pass and watched over the Black Ink clan army that was fighting against the humans from afar, and he did manage to produce fairly good results. This was especially true for E5 territory, which he had been targeting. After all the battles over there thus far, the Red Flame Army had lost many of their masters, including a lot in the 8th Order. If this continued, it would take less than a century for the Red Flame Army to be beaten half to death by the Black Ink clan. Mo Nai did not dream of wiping out the humans in one fell swoop, as he knew that none of the human race's armies could be underestimated. Even if they did not have a 9th Order master with them, there were still a lot of powerful masters, including the divine spirits who were especially tricky in a fight. Thus, if he wanted to decimate the Red Flame Army, he had to take things one step at a time. Although the humans continually added new rising stars to their ranks, as long as the Black Ink clan acted decisively enough, they could kill off more masters than what the humans could produce, and the time would eventually come when the Red Flame Army could no longer hold out. To carry out this strategy, the Black Ink clan had to make a lot of sacrifices too. Not a single innate territory lord was left behind at the Noreturn Pass or the front lines of other battlefields. Under the command of both Mo Nai and Mou, all of the innate territory lords who snuck out from the primordial heaven's source grand restriction had been turned into pseudo-royal lords using the source fusion technique. A huge number of innate territory lords had been sacrificed to create a sizable number of pseudo-royal lords, which was the reason why the Black Ink clan could still hold out against the humans. Otherwise, how would they be able to maintain the fight on the battlefield when the humans had 9th Order masters while they did not have any royal lords with them? Furthermore, after all the years of accumulation, the Black Ink clan was about to witness the birth of new royal lords. During the early days when Mo Nai first assumed command over the Black Ink clan, he had already selected a large group of territory lords who had the potential to become royal lords and kept them hidden inside the Noreturn Pass to cultivate. At long last, he was about to reap the fruits of his labor. So long as more royal lords were born, the Black Ink clan would be able to make up for the disadvantages they faced due to the 9th Order masters, and when that happened, the human race's situation would become even more disastrous. Do the humans think they're winning just because they reclaimed a few great territories? What a joke. Mo Nai set down the reports in his hand and leaned back against his chair. He tapped his fingers on his desk with a thoughtful look in his eyes. He was considering whether he should increase the number of pseudo-royal lords in E5 territory to put the Red Flame Army under even more pressure. Right now, the Black Ink clan was in a position to do so, as there were many pseudo-royal lords at the Noreturn Pass who were restless and could not stay put. They often came to him to ask for the chance to join the fights, though he rejected them all. What he wanted was to kill as many of the humans' most powerful masters as possible to weaken them overall. There were often 8th Order masters of the Red Flame Army who willingly sacrificed their lives to injure pseudo-royal lords and force them to leave the battlefield. Mo Nai was more than happy with this situation, as he did not care about the deaths of any of the Black Ink clansmen weaker than territory lords. All that mattered was that the territory lords and pseudo-royal lords remained alive. Even if they were heavily injured, they just had to return to the Noreturn Pass and rest for some time, where they would easily be able to make a full recovery. However, before he could make up his mind, a territory lord under his command came barging in. Mo Nai looked at the territory lord and frowned. Judging by the look on the latter's face, he could tell that something bad must have happened. He was unperturbed by this, though. Out on the battlefield, things could change at any moment, and while he had been receiving mostly good news from the front lines, there would still be times when things did not go their way. After all his years of commanding the Black Ink clan army, Mo Nai had long since developed the ability to maintain his composure even in the face of the most devastating situations. His fingers stopped tapping as he asked coolly, "What is it?" The territory lord eyed Mo Nai with a worried look and held out a jade slip with both hands. "It's a message from E5 territory. The situation on the battlefield has changed." E5 territory? Mo Nai's eyes flashed with surprise. The reports he was reading just now had been from E5 territory, and according to them, everything was going swimmingly for the Black Ink clan. The pseudo-royal lords had prepared a strategy to target the Red Flame Army's leaders, and there was a high chance they would be able to kill one of the army commanders. Once they succeeded, the Red Flame Army would not only be losing a strong and experienced Eighth Order master, but the Eastern Army would be left leaderless as well. It would be a huge boost to the Black Ink Clan's plan to destroy the Red Flame Army. So why would things change all of a sudden? Imo raised his hand and took the jade slip before using his divine sense to study it. The very next breath, Imo leapt out of his chair with his eyes the widest they could stretch. He was filled with shock and disbelief as he cried out, "That's impossible!" Even when Xiao Xiao used the world bead and let out the long-slumbering giant spirit god, Imo had not been as flustered as he was now, and it was all due to how unbelievable the battle report he received was. He could not believe his eyes and seemed to think he had misread it as he quickly took another look. Alas, his eyes were perfectly fine. The report stated that Yang Kai had suddenly appeared in E5 territory before slaughtering Jiang Qi and capturing Hu Yu, along with 4 other pseudo-royal lords. The Black Ink Clan army had fled in defeat as they suffered massive casualties. They had gathered back at their main base and were on high alert for possible skirmishes. Yang Kai showed up at the E5 territory? This must be a bad joke. He's supposed to be confined inside the universe furnace. How could he show up at E5 territory? Imo did not want to believe this, but he scrutinized the report that clearly described everything Yang Kai had done. He was able to capture 5 pseudo-royal lords because he used a strange Dao Strength River. The so-called Dao Strength River was not at all unfamiliar to Imo Back inside the universe furnace, he had gotten into a fight with Yang Kai and knew just how frightening that Dao Strength River was. During that fight, if Meng Ke had not sacrificed his own life to help Imo the latter could very well have been killed by Yang Kai. However, even with Meng Ke's help, Imo was only able to prolong the fight for a little while longer before fleeing in defeat and narrowly managing to stay alive. Imo had never seen any other human using a Dao Strength River apart from Yang Kai. Is it really Yang Kai? Even Imo heart was quaking. Why would it be him? How could it be him? Imo could not figure it out at all. Isn't that bastard supposed to be confined inside the universe furnace? Didn't he have to wait until the next time the universe furnace opened to have the chance to come back out? It has only been a few centuries, and there has been no sign of the universe furnace opening up again. So how did he come out? Imo was uneasy, and his mind was riddled with chaotic thoughts. It took quite a while before he was able to regain his composure. Based on the report, it had to have been Yang Kai who showed up at E5 territory. He was the only one with a Dao Strength River, and only he could capture 5 pseudo-royal lords alive. No other Ninth Order master could do such a thing. After giving it some more thought, Imo realized it was true that there had not been any proof to confirm that Yang Kai was confined inside the universe furnace. He had only thought so for 2 reasons. The first was that, when the universe furnace closed up again, he did not see Yang Kai who should have reappeared with him, and that had given him the chance to avoid disaster. Secondly, it was based on the news the Black Ink Clan gleaned out of the Black Ink disciples. The humans also thought that Yang Kai was stuck inside the universe furnace. Otherwise, there was no reason why he did not show up after so many years since the universe furnace's closure. However, no one could be sure whether or not he was indeed confined inside the universe furnace, as no one saw it for themselves. Moreover, even if Yang Kai had been stuck inside the universe furnace, it was not necessarily true that he had to wait for it to open up again before he could escape. That bastard always has some mysterious trick up his sleeve that allows him to do things no one else can. Imo rubbed his temples, feeling like his head was about to explode. His cheerful mood from earlier had vanished entirely. All along, he thought he would no longer have to deal with Yang Kai, the thorn in his side. Over the last few centuries, he accepted the possibility of Yang Kai being locked up inside the universe furnace as fact. However, now that the battle report was right before his eyes, the terror that had been buried deep inside his heart was pouring out again. He was not afraid of any of the other Ninth Order masters, be it the newer ones or the 2 more experienced ones. Yang Kai, the one behind his suffering and numerous defeats, was the only one he was truly wary of. There was no point for him to continue with his earlier considerations now. Since Yang Kai had shown up at E5 territory, things were not going to go according to the Black Ink Clan's plans anymore. As someone who fought against Yang Kai inside the Universe Furnace, Nayi knew Yang Kai's strength better than anyone else. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5838. Report, Marshall Peak. The report from E5 territory clearly stated that Jiang Qi had been killed and 5 other pseudo-royal lords, including Hu Yu, had been captured. Nayi knew without a doubt what their fate would be. Thus, he swiftly gave the order, send a message back to E5 territory. Tell the pseudo-royal lords to group up and keep a close eye on Yang Kai. Don't let him get a chance to strike again. The territory lord left to do as told. However, a few moments later, he came running back again. Seeing the ashen look on his face, Nayi had a bad feeling. He gritted his teeth and asked, "What happened now?" The territory lord hung his head low and held out another jade slip with trembling hands. His voice quivered as he informed. A second report came from E5 territory. Nayi glanced at the jade slip but did not check it right away. First, he took a deep breath. If a second report was sent so soon after the first, it could only mean one thing. Nayi knew that something terrible must have happened in E5 territory. More importantly, the Black Ink Clan had to have been the ones who suffered. Otherwise, they would not have sent 2 reports in a row within such a short period. The situation was probably even worse than he feared. Nayi slowly took a seat before taking the jade slip. He composed himself and checked the dispatch. Despite being mentally prepared for it, he nearly fainted from the latest report. The previous one stated that Yang Kai showed up at E5 territory, slaughtered Jiang Qi, and captured 5 pseudo-royal lords, including Hu Yu. This second report said that Yang Kai had snuck up on the remaining pseudo-royal lords despite their vigilance. He withstood the attacks of all of them and used the Dao Strength River to capture 2 more pseudo-royal lords. None of the pseudo-royal lords had noticed him approaching, and there had been no sign of him at all before his appearance. In just half a day, the Black Ink Clan lost 8 pseudo-royal lords in E5 territory. Even though there were many of them posted there, it did not mean that the Black Ink Clan could afford to let them be killed off in such rapid succession. The surviving pseudo-royal lords knew the situation was dire and had retreated from E5 territory immediately after the second raid. Many of the territory lords followed suit and were fleeing as well. Though the report did not mention the rest of the Black Ink Clan army in E5 territory, it made no difference. Since the pseudo-royal lords and a majority of the territory lords had fled, the army could only offer their heads up to the enemy if they stuck around any longer. Nayi was certain that they were already fleeing in defeat as well, but the humans would not be merciful given this incredibly rare opportunity. He could foresee how bloody the chase would be. Without the more powerful Black Ink Clansmen, the Black Ink Clan army would not be able to put up any resistance against the human race army. Many emotions flashed across Nayi's face as he sat there after reading the second report, ultimately crushing the jade slip by accident in the end. The territory lord carefully eyed Nayi's expression as he asked, "Sir, should we order the army in E5 territory to retreat?" He knew that the situation did not look good for the Black Ink Clan and was worried about their army. Nayi just took a deep breath and slowly shook his head. They can't retreat. Even if others did not know what Yang Kai was capable of, he did. The Black Ink Clan had set up their base near the territory gate because it made it easy for them to deploy more manpower or make a quick retreat. If they did fail to hold out against their enemy, they could withdraw through the territory gate and prevent further losses. However, that was no longer possible with Yang Kai around. He, who was unmatched in the Tao of space, would surely lock down the territory gate at once. There was a high chance that a mass slaughter was taking place in E5 territory at this very moment. Nayi did not know how many members of the Black Ink Clan would successfully escape, but the only silver lining was the fact that the pseudo-royal lords had fled in advance with many of the territory lords as well. Although the losses were heavy, it was not a complete massacre of everyone there. Furthermore, the ones who escaped in time were the more powerful ones, so it was a bit of good news amidst all the bad. That being said, Yang Kai was bound to hunt the pseudo-royal lords down. While they might have escaped for now, they were not entirely out of danger yet. Imo Nai composed himself and gave the order, "Send word out for everyone to be on high alert for any sign of Yang Kai. If there is even the slightest hint of him, report back to me right away." "Yes, sir," the territory lord replied before leaving to carry out the order. Soon, a slew of reports were transmitted back to the Norreturn Pass. Yang Kai had left E5 territory and entered Silver Frost territory. Yang Kai showed up in Thunderbolt territory, found the Black Ink clan's forward outpost there, and was swiftly making his way over. The Black Ink clan lost contact with a mining squad in Sundragon territory and suspected that they had been eliminated by Yang Kai. As the reports gathered in front of Imo Nai, he fixed his eyes on the universe chart and mapped out Yang Kai's movements. Soon, he figured out Yang Kai's true intentions. The Norreturn Pass. He's heading straight for the Norreturn Pass. Imo Nai's expression darkened, though it was not a complete surprise to him. Yang Kai had often shown up at the Norreturn Pass to cause trouble, even when he was only an 8th Order Master. He was the perfect example of someone who had both brains and brawn, as well as the boldness to go with them. Now that he was a 9th Order Master, he was even less wary of the Black Ink clan. Sooner or later, he would have shown up at the Norreturn Pass. Nevertheless, Imo Nai did not expect Yang Kai to be this impatient and head straight for the Norreturn Pass after helping the Red Flame Army at E5 territory. Based on the reports he received from the various great territories, Yang Kai did not seem to be pausing for anything, save for dealing with the Black Ink clansmen he happened to encounter along the way. That bastard sure has the guts. Imo Nai was shocked and also a little expectant. Yang Kai's confidence also provided the Black Ink clan with a chance to deal with him. To arrive at the Norreturn Pass, Yang Kai would need to pass through the Barren Territory Gate. Thus, the Black Ink clan could set up an ambush in advance there and catch him off guard the moment he appeared. They had a fighting chance of taking him down if all the powerful masters at the Norreturn Pass joined forces. The Black Ink clan had attempted this strategy before. They had set up a 4 gates 8 palaces Great Pagoda array at the Territory Gate in advance and isolated the surrounding space. However, Yang Kai did not appear at the Territory Gate back then. He used some kind of method that allowed him to travel through a path that the Black Ink clan did not know about, and appeared on the Black Ink battlefield instead, which led to the failure of that plan. However, things were not the same now. At the time, Yang Kai was an 8th Order Master who was vigilant enough to take precautions. Now that Yang Kai was a 9th Order Master and his power multiplied many times over, Imo Nai was fairly certain that the former had become rather arrogant. Based on Yang Kai's movements, he was bound to enter the Norreturn Pass through the Territory Gate, so the Black Ink clan had an opportunity. With this thought in mind, Imo Nai quickly went to meet with Imo, who was currently cultivating in seclusion, and informed him about Yang Kai. Imo was stunned, furious, and sorrowful over the news that Yang Kai had shown up at E5 territory, killed numerous pseudo-royal lords, and caused the loss of the majority of the Black Ink clan army stationed over there. He did not care about the Black Ink clan army's casualties, only the deaths of the pseudo-royal lords, but even that was hard to accept. Ever since all the innate territory lords that snuck out of the primordial heaven's source grand restriction had been turned into pseudo-royal lords, the Black Ink clan had no way of increasing the number of pseudo-royal lords they had. After several centuries of not hearing any news about Yang Kai, Imo thought he would never have to see that human again. Who would have thought that Yang Kai would show up in such a manner and cause such heavy losses for the Black Ink clan? It was just as Imo Nai had said once. It was one thing to deal with Yang Kai if he was still an 8th Order Master, but after he became a 9th Order Master, he had become the Black Ink clan's most formidable opponent. However, when Imo Nai informed Imo of his plan, Imo could see that it was a good opportunity as well and readily agreed to it. All at once, the pseudo-royal lords at the Norreturn Pass, along with Imo Nai and Imo, the two true royal lords, began setting up outside the Territory Gate before waiting with dire expressions. While they were busy setting up their trap, Yang Kai was steadily making his way across many great territories where the universe worlds seemed to be lifeless as they were all covered in Black Ink strength. He could not detect any vitality from them. Yang Kai knew that his movements were not hidden from the Black Ink Clan right now, but he did not intend to hide from them in the first place. After all, the Black Ink Clan would not have been able to discover his tracks if he used Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability. He was making this trip to the no-return pass to stir things up and take back a few things while he was at it. Yang Kai made his way through one great territory after another, dealing with any of the Black Ink Clan's outposts that he stumbled across along the way. At last, after over a month of traveling, Yang Kai passed through the territory gate from the Shattered Heaven to the Barren Territory. Similar to its name, the Barren Territory was empty and devoid of everything. All along, the humans considered it an important battleground and prepared it appropriately. The leaders at the Supreme Headquarters had long since fleshed out the idea of besieging the no-return pass, and the moment they did, the Barren Territory would be where the ultimate battle was fought. The final confrontation between the human race and the Black Ink Clan would take place here. Millennia ago, the human race army had achieved great results when the Black Ink Clan first invaded this place, and if it had not been for the Black Ink Giant Spirit God's interference, breaking through the boundary wall between the Barren Territory and Wind Mist Territory, the Black Ink Clan would not have been able to invade the 3,000 worlds so easily. The bodies of countless masters from both sides littered the battlefield back then. It was also the final resting place of many top masters, including both Ninth Order Old Ancestors and Royal Lords. The moment Yang Kai stepped into the Barren Territory, he sensed alarming shockwaves coming from a place deep within the void. Though the waves were somewhat spaced out, each one was powerful enough to make his heart pound and the surrounding area shake. He focused his sight and stared into the distance, only to find four towering silhouettes clashing in the depths of the void. The fight was intense, and space itself was crumbling around them. A fight between a giant spirit god and a Black Ink Giant Spirit God did not involve any kind of tactics or even any form of techniques. It was a completely physical fight with simple punches and slaps thrown around. However, as both parties possessed heaven-destroying and earth-shattering strength, even such a simple physical battle was enough to cause terrifying impact and fallout. It was not surprising that Mi Jingluan said the battle in the Barren Territory resulted in needless losses for the Black Ink Clan. If the Black Ink Clan at the No-Return Pass wanted to send soldiers out as reinforcements to the various front lines, they would need to pass through the Barren Territory, and considering how strong the aftershocks of the fight were, weaker Black Ink Clansmen would not be able to survive unless they had powerful masters protecting them. This was an unexpected but pleasant surprise. When Yang Kai gave that world bead to old ancestor Xiao Xiao, he had only done so as a means of countering the Black Ink Clan's possible strategy. He did not expect it to result in such a boon for the humans. The four giant spirit gods were split up onto two different battlefields. Yang Kai spotted Ada, who was bald, and Aer, who had a lock of hair. As for the two Black Ink Giant Spirit Gods, Yang Kai had to spend some time figuring out which was which. The one Ada was up against was most likely the one who was revived from the late ancient era battlefield, while the one fighting against Aer was the one from the divine spirit ancestral land. Though the two Black Ink Giant Spirit Gods looked similar at first glance, upon closer inspection, there were still minor differences that one could pick up on. Initially, the Black Ink Clan had a third Black Ink Giant Spirit God, which was the one that escaped from the primordial heaven's source grant restriction. Nevertheless, many human race masters had joined forces and defeated that one in the Barren Territory, which was something to celebrate. Otherwise, if the Black Ink Clan had another Black Ink Giant Spirit God with them now, the human race would be in an extremely difficult predicament. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5839. How about now? Marshall Peak, the clash between the giant spirit gods stirred up Yang Kai's urge to join the fight, but he had to force himself to quell that desire of his. He still had some self-awareness. Despite being a Ninth Order Master now and possessing strength that seemed to touch the limits of martial Dao, it was still not enough for him to go up against a being as strong as a giant spirit god. If he did insert himself into the fight, he would only end up fleeing in defeat. Furthermore, if he was not mistaken, the Black Ink Clan at the No-Return Pass would have already set up the stage for him to put on a grand show. Thus, he decided to stay out of the battle between the four giant spirit gods. He cupped his hand around his mouth and hollered, "Ada, Aer, fight!" His voice rang like a dragon's roar and spread far and wide. Ada, who was in the middle of his battle, could not resist turning his head around to take a look, but he ended up being caught off guard as his opponent landed a punch against his face which caused him to stagger. Infuriated, Ada steadied himself and bent down before charging at his opponent and grabbing him by the waist. He landed a series of blows with his elbows and knees which caused the black-ink giant spirit god to stumble. Then, Ada climbed on top of his opponent and began pounding the latter with his fists. The pummeling was so intense that every punch rang out like thunder across the entire barren territory. Yang Kai's eyes twitched at the sight. "I better not disturb them." He then suppressed his aura and started rushing towards the territory gate to the Norreturn Pass. There were many black ink clansmen on guard at the territory gate all the time. This was not only to maintain control over the territory gate, but also to keep an eye on the fight between the giant spirit gods. Thus, when they heard Yang Kai's voice, their expressions stiffened as they immediately rushed through the territory gate and headed back to the Norreturn Pass. Soon, the news of Yang Kai's appearance in the barren territory reached Mo Nai and Mou. The two royal lords had grim expressions as they exchanged looks. That bastard came all the way here after all. Even though he's now a Ninth Order master, if he does pass through the territory gate, we might have the chance to take him down. The trap for Yang Kai was already in place, and once Mo Nai gave the order, the black ink clansmen got into their positions. Yang Kai whizzed through the barren territory and arrived at the territory gate that led to the Norreturn Pass. He glanced at it and stepped through without even pausing. As soon as he did, space principles enveloped him, and he felt everything around him shake ever so slightly. The sight before him blurred for a moment, and at the very next moment, he popped up in front of the Norreturn Pass. All at once, dozens of powerful auras shot at him from all directions to lock him in place. Two of them stood out among the rest. Yang Kai smirked as he studied Mou and Mo Nai, the two royal lords, with a strange feeling in his heart. In the past, he came to raise chaos at the Norreturn Pass a few times, but he always snuck around and took extreme precautions to avoid being discovered whenever possible. However, he could now afford to walk right in without needing to be cautious at all. He could openly step through the territory gate and make his way to the Norreturn Pass. The Black Ink Clan did not attack Yang Kai right away, as there was no point in doing so. The territory gate was right behind him, and he could return to the barren territory at any time. Even though the Black Ink Clan gathered every available master here, they did not feel confident about their ability to take him down immediately. They knew their best chance to strike was not when Yang Kai first showed up and had planned accordingly. Thus, they patiently waited. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. Mo Nai's expression was the grimmest it could be. Even though he could tell from the various dispatches that it was indeed Yang Kai who showed up in E5 territory and all the other great territories along the way, he still harbored the barest glimmer of hope that the reports had been mistaken, as he had not seen Yang Kai himself. However, now that Yang Kai was before his very eyes, even that glimmer of hope was dashed. He's really back. As someone who suffered multiple miserable losses at Yang Kai's hands, Mo Nai was more cautious of him than anyone else. That's it. Yang Kai abruptly chuckled in the middle of the standoff. He thought the Black Ink Clan would attack him the moment he appeared, and had not thought they would be able to hold themselves back so well. However, he had an idea as to why they did not attack him. The territory gate was right behind him, so if they did attack him, he could still make an easy retreat. His taunting smile aggravated many from the Black Ink Clan, and most of the auras that had honed in on him grew aggressive. Ever since the Black Ink Clan's invasion into the 3,000 worlds, the human race had been the ones at a disadvantage. No human had ever been this arrogant when standing right on the doorstep of the Black Ink Clan's greatest stronghold. The Black Ink Clan naturally felt deeply humiliated. "You've got quite the nerve, Yang Kai." Mo Nai coldly snorted. Yang Kai studied Mo Nai for a moment, as if it were his first time seeing the latter before remarking, "And you're quite lucky." Mo Nai frowned, and soon, he realized what Yang Kai meant. When the universe furnace closed up, Emo Nai thought that he was doomed to die. He had been badly injured at the time, so if Yang Kai had returned to the same spot as him, he would not have been able to put up a fight. Yang Kai would have killed him off at once. He was indeed rather lucky to be able to stand here now. Emo Nai did not know what Yang Kai had gone through, and why he was only returning after all these years, but either way, he had barely managed to escape from Yang Kai with his life the last time they met. You're quite lucky yourself. Emo Nai snapped back coolly. He looked into Yang Kai's cultivation journey and realized that the latter was what the humans considered someone blessed by destiny. Yang Kai had stumbled across many opportunities throughout his cultivation journey. Otherwise, he would not have been able to rise as quickly as he did. Yang Kai grinned. Luck is also a form of strength. Then, his eyes flitted around him as he taunted. What's wrong? Weren't all of you waiting for me? I'm here now. Aren't you going to attack? What's the point of attacking you now? Emo Nai growled to himself. Take a few steps forward if you dare. To ensure that their plan could be executed flawlessly, they had to find a way to get Yang Kai away from the territory gate first. Otherwise, if Yang Kai was unwilling to engage in battle with them, the trap that they set up would go to waste. Oh, I get it now, Yang Kai commented, seemingly to himself. You're afraid I'll run off, right? As soon as he said that, he waved his hand, and as space principles vibrated, the territory gate behind him suddenly started shaking. At the very next moment, the territory gate began freezing up like a lake in winter. In the blink of an eye, the territory gate that had remained stable for countless years was completely frozen, the swirling ripples on its surface now completely locked in place. Emo Nai and Emo Yu were stupefied, and all the other pseudo-royal lords were agape as well. What the hell is he doing? How about now? Yang Kai smirked at the Black Ink clan. Begin. Emo Nai roared at once. Though they were boggled by Yang Kai's actions, they believed that he was still too arrogant for cutting off his only path of retreat. Their original plan involved luring Yang Kai away from the territory gate to avoid letting him escape at any given moment. But since they no longer had to worry about that, Emo Nai did not hesitate anymore. Since Yang Kai had voluntarily made the situation work in the Black Ink clan's favor, Mo Nai was not going to disappoint him. As soon as his roar rang out, a series of powerful attacks shot out from all directions as nearly 20 silhouettes dashed towards Yang Kai. These were all pseudo-royal lords. Furthermore, they were not the only ones around, as 12 more pseudo-royal lords were tasked with powering the Grand Array. They quickly moved with the intention of setting up a heaven-sealing earth-locking Grand Array. Once they got into position, with the help of the array boards and banners they held, they could lock up the local space, making it impossible for Yang Kai to escape. Emo Nai and Emo Yu attacked as well. Since they were up against an opponent as formidable as Yang Kai, neither of the royal lords held back as they unleashed their full strength. Instantly, Black Ink strength flooded over from all directions as a myriad of secret techniques showered down on Yang Kai. A loud dragon roar rang out as golden light shot out. This was followed by some commotion, and the moment the pseudo-royal lords got near Yang Kai, they suddenly realized that the originally small human had transformed into something a lot more massive. He was covered in golden dragon scales, and his dragon beard fluttered in the aura wind. A pair of intimidating dragon horns grew out of his forehead, and intense dragon pressure emanated from him, seemingly solidifying the void around him. A divine dragon? Emo Yu, who was launching off a secret technique at Yang Kai, was completely taken aback and his face twitched at the sight. He did know that Yang Kai was a Ninth Order master and could take a dragon form, but when did he become a divine dragon? Emo Yu had taken part in the first battle at the No Return Pass and could still remember the power of the divine dragons from back then, both of whom were even stronger than the average Ninth Order human master. He had once suffered at the hands of the previous head of the Dragon Clan. He's both a Ninth Order master and a divine dragon? Just how strong is he now? Let me see what you can do. Yang Kai roared. After switching into his dragon form, his thirst for battle intensified. After becoming a Ninth Order master, he had only had an all-out fight once against Emo Nai, and even though he won that battle, his enemy was not in peak condition. Yang Kai was already heavily injured at the time. Furthermore, He had just used the three selves source reconstitution art to combine with his two other selves. Thus, he did not have the time to stabilize his cultivation and could not wield his full power. Centuries had passed since then, and his cultivation realm had been solidified. Yang Kai was at his peak right now, and the only way he could test his limits, apart from doing it here at the No-Return Pass, was to challenge a black ink giant spirit god. However, a black ink giant spirit god was too powerful, and Yang Kai figured he would not be able to take one on, so it was best for him to target the No-Return Pass instead. That was the reason why Yang Kai chose not to travel stealthily. He wanted to know what his current limits were. Furthermore, for certain reasons, this fight was unavoidable for him as well. Yang Kai roared as he stretched out in a grabbing motion. Considering Yang Kai's size right now, even just a dragon claw of his was enough to cover half the sky. The pseudo-royal lords who were in that direction immediately saw the world darkening around them as the gigantic shadow loomed over their heads. It was accompanied by an immense sense of pressure that made them quake. It was the dragon pressure of a divine dragon, and it weighed down on them so heavily that their knees nearly buckled. Space-time Tao strength began surging as time was thrown into disarray and space warped. The pseudo-royal lord's senses were thrown completely off, and they could not dodge in time. Thus, Yang Kai caught them with his dragon claw. Yang Kai tightened his dragon claw with a powerful squeeze that resulted in the sound of bones cracking, followed by a litany of pained cries. Martial Peak. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.